Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing The Beguiled. This was directed by Sofia Coppola. Sofia is of course the daughter of the legendary filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola, and so she's definitely carrying on the torch, and that's great, good for her. I think she's a very different filmmaker from her father, and that's part of her appeal. She has a very distinct style that definitely sets her apart, especially visually. But she's always kind of had this hazy sort of hipster feel to her films and kind of a pastel color palette. She really likes these coming-of-age stories. She likes to tell stories, particularly of women, not always, but more often than not, I'd say, stories of women that are kind of caged by their society that they've grown up in. I think she really did that well in her very first film, The Virgin Suicides. And I think of all of the films that she's made, that might be my favorite. I may have to revisit a couple of them that I haven't seen in a while, but as of now, I'd say that I think Virgin Suicides was her best work. I adored Sofia Coppola when I was a teenager. I loved everything about her style because it was very similar to mine in terms of what I liked. I loved her aesthetic. I loved just the cinematography, the lighting, the mise-en-scene, her soundtracks. I think I've owned all of her soundtracks in the past from her movies, and I just ate it up because it had that very, on the exterior at least, a very kind of arty, picturesque style. But I do admit, and maybe it's because I'm a bitter old soul, I don't know, but the older I get, the less enamored I am with her. I just feel like she doesn't really have substantial characters and compelling narratives that really fill the film, make it feel dense with meaning. And I know I'm not alone in that. I know that's been her criticism quite often. But after seeing The Beguiled, it pretty much reaffirmed all of those things that I originally thought. This film takes place during the Civil War in the Beyonce Lemonade house, fun fact. But really, it's a all-girls boarding school, and one of the girls is out walking and she's picking mushrooms, and she comes across a wounded Union soldier played by Colin Farrell. The ladies decide that even though he is the enemy, he's fighting for the other side, they'll take care of him and they will nurture him back to health. But of course, he is the only man in the entire house, and because of the war, a lot of these ladies probably haven't seen a man in a very, very long time, or at least have been close to a man. And so because of that, naturally, sexual tensions start rising, and there's a lot of jealousy and manipulation, some love triangles going on. So, I mean, it's a great hook. It's a great premise. In terms of the things I liked, I mean, this is probably obvious, but Sofia builds the tension through sounds and through imagery just beautifully. Everything looks fantastic and authentic. The atmosphere is very tangible, and it's all about those textures. There's very little music in this film, which is very surprising because that's a lot of what Sofia is known for, what she has been known for in the past. But yeah, this film, instead of having a soundtrack, really what you hear are the sounds, crickets chirping in those hot summer nights, doors creaking, the wooden doors. She really immerses you in this world, in this time period, really extraordinarily. And it is very eerie, very quiet. And it's that stillness, the juxtaposition between that stillness and all this budding sexuality that is kind of bursting beneath this very porcelain exterior, this southern etiquette. And I just really like stories like that. I like having this kind of genteel southern world of ladies and gentlemen, but then there's all of this kind of, this brutality and sexuality that's simmering underneath all of that. We've seen that quite a bit, I think that A Streetcar Named Desire perfected that. That film is directed by Elia Kazan, one of my favorites. And I don't see her as being self-indulgent. I see this totally serving her style in the most perfect way possible. And yet, I feel like she thinks that she's filling all this silence with imagery that's really kind of being so metaphorical and really kind of unwrapping the human psyche, but it's not. The problem is, everything looks great and is so beautifully done in terms of just the way she's directing, and yet there's no density to the rest of it. Now, it's important to know that this was originally a book, and then a film was made of it in 1971 that was directed by Don Siegel and starred Clint Eastwood. And I know it's not always fair to compare two interpretations, but I'm sorry. If you've seen the original Beguiling, the 1971 film, and you've seen this one, they are very different, and you're going to compare them. And especially when I put them side by side, if I have the Don Siegel version, then I have the Coppola version, unfortunately, it just exposes all the flaws to me in the new one, because I think that the Don Siegel version is so much better. And what's so weird is that these two movies are very similar in terms of structure. The time length of both movies is very close together, and the stories are almost exact. which is so perplexing to me because I feel like watching the original, there's so much going on and there's so much more to chew on than there is with this one. I mean, I watched the original and it was just so bold, and, you know, it conveyed a lot of that subverted sexuality through all kinds of character dynamics, through manipulation, through violence. It just felt more meaningful because there's a lot more going on with the characters. Each character is very distinct. And so when you have the climax of the film, the stakes are just higher and you feel so much more for them. It's just dark and twisted. It's psychedelic. It's kind of trashy melodrama, but also very black comedy. So there's a lot of things going on, and there's a great dream sequence in the movie, in the Siegel version, that I just have to mention because I love it so much. But there's like, yeah, it's a dream of one of the ladies in the film who's at the boarding school, and there's two people where there's kind of a triangle, and she's having sex with the Clint Eastwood character, and then the other girl comes in, and it's kind of like this threesome, and then those two ladies start making out. There's all this sort of strange surrealism where it feels very spiritual and gothic and religious even. And it is fucking awesome. It blends all of these kind of subconscious ideas about sexuality in a way that makes the film more intriguing, more like from a psychological standpoint. And I know that the Coppola version, she purposely wanted to make this film very differently. You know, it's her point of view, and that's, you know, I respect that completely. For her, she wanted to strip this film down to the bare minimum and really focus just on these main characters. And, you know, it's okay to have ambiguity. I can respect ambiguity. I actually think that the Siegel film could learn a thing or two from Sofia Coppola, in the sense that in that movie, there is a lot of backstory, and I like the backstory, but I feel like a lot of it is on the surface. That was one of my big problems with the original film, is that everything was spelled out. I like that everything is very subtle and intriguing, and there's a lot of kind of double entendres going on, kind of fizzling in the newer version. But I also think that in the new version, she sacrificed so many points where she could have opened up the narrative for a lot of really complex and intriguing ideas and possibilities. For instance, in the original film and also in the book, I haven't read the book, but just what I know of it, there are a couple of storylines that are used in the original film adaptation that Sofia Coppola chose to leave out. One of them involves a slave character, an African-American slave. So when she did Mark Maron's podcast, he addressed that. He asked her about why she decided to leave all of that out. And her answer was that she didn't want to dismiss this African-American character because she saw it just as a side character, and she felt like she didn't want to brush over racism lightly. And if she was going to do it, she'd really want to tackle it. And I really don't buy that answer. I'm sorry. I find that to be the biggest cop-out, and she's smarter than that. She's a lot smarter than that answer. I just don't think she wanted to push herself into territory that was maybe scary for her, that she wanted to stick to her strengths. But the problem with that is that she kind of remains stagnant as an artist. I mean, with a lot of her films, particularly in recent years, they are all very similar. They have a lot of the same problems, and I don't feel that growth. And I think to dismiss the slave character completely misses the point, because I don't see her just as a side character. I actually think that in the original film, that was one of my favorite characters, because she, again, opened the narrative up to so many different possibilities, because you have all of these ladies, but then you have this slave who has a completely different point of view as a woman. And so those dynamics with the wounded soldier open up in ways that are all very interesting, very intriguing. And I also love the actress who played her. She was really very strong and very smart. And then this also kind of annoyed me. Maron asked her about the incest storyline, because there is a little subplot that involves incest. And Coppola's response was, well, I wanted this movie to be about desire, and I didn't want to cloud the film with anything about perversion. And that, again, I don't buy that answer either, because to me, that is the whole point. That's so much what is inherent. It's a core part of the story, that perversion and sexuality go together. Perversion is inherent in humans, and it's something that we have to live with. And the idea of living in a world, a civilized society, where all of that is frowned upon creates a lot of shame. And with that shame comes repression and anger and all of these things that are great fuel for these kinds of stories. So that just tells me that Coppola really missed the whole point of the idea of the story. And I think it shows, because the film, even though it looks great, it's very kind of coquettish, but very hollow. It almost feels like a treatment of a story rather than a fully fleshed out script. She didn't feel the need to really explore the story that she's trying to tell. And as a result, I wasn't particularly moved and I wasn't really that intrigued by the movie. And, you know, I know it sounds like I'm totally hating on this movie, but I do admire parts of it. And I certainly admire Sofia Coppola as a director. I just get, you know, I talk like this when I see a director that has a lot of potential and it just isn't quite there. You know, if I didn't care, then this would be a 5-minute review, but I do. I like her and I want her to grow, but unfortunately she just didn't really do that here. So I can't really recommend this movie. If you're gonna watch either version, definitely watch the original 1971 version. And that is my review. Thank you all for listening. All of my social media information is below. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe if you want to. Catch you next time.